Welcome to the Adhocracy Show. On today's show,
Okay, we've defined propaganda.
so is it good or bad?
Let's continue our propaganda series.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm JD Melville.
And I'm David Landeen, and welcome to the Adhocracy Show, where we geek out about advertising, marketing, art, and design, and today, propaganda.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, first, the thing we got to tell you about is the 100 for 100 contest.
There are 3 days left, people.
3 days left.
Imagine that you back in school, or maybe you're in school, and you're like, oh man, there's a test in 3 days, and all of a sudden you pull out like your greatest work ever.
This is that time. If you want to know a little bit about that, here's a video. Bing! That'll tell you all about it. We have one of our submissions right here. So you have a couple days left if you want to enter that and win prizes and money. Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's get back into propaganda.
Okay.
We have done everything to define it.
Yeah, we know the definition that we are using for propaganda, so we can all be on the same page. Now, if you didn't watch our first video, you should go watch that. I guess you can just click on this button up here, because that'll also have a video for our first one.
So this will be our second video in our deep dive series on propaganda. And so what we're going to do is now that we've defined it, we're going to really try to task ourselves with the way to judge it.
Yeah.
Whether it's a quality piece of propaganda, whether it's good or bad.
Recognizing it is the first task. Understanding it and knowing how to judge it is the second task. So we're on to step 2.
Yeah, and now when we're saying good and bad, we're not necessarily saying, that the cause that's being propagated is good or bad. Because depending on what side you're on, it could be both.
Yeah, just go check out any chat room, or not chat room, any comment section, any political argument ever. Well, actually anything. Yeah. Any comment section, anywhere.
And being that propaganda is basically for the purpose of promoting or influencing, of course, both sides could be argued.
And right and wrong.
Yeah.
So not good and bad as in I think it's good or I think it's bad. More saying how is it being used correctly or incorrectly, or for good or for bad, or
is it helping people be informed? Is it, giving truth behind it? Is it being supportive, of what actually happens? Or is it false, generalizing, baseless, racist? The latter being what most people think today refer to when you hear people say, oh, that's propaganda. That's what they're referring to these days.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some quick examples of good propaganda. And they may include things like anti-smoking campaigns, blood donation encouragement, social awareness campaigns, or child labor law issues of the past. So these are causes that are helping the overall society by informing the public about what's going on.
Yeah, doing good, doing good and usually based off of real fact, real things. Where bad examples may include things like the generalization of other countries during wartime, saying that the whole country is awful and evil and they're all this, and using scare tactics to evoke action. Basically making you feel like, I've got to be afraid of these people. Hidden purposes behind the actions, or dehumanizing and shocking people so their opinion is a very extreme action.
Now, if you've watched our first episode, you'll know that every time we talk about these rules and separate things, there are so many gray areas because there may be a very good cause with some nefarious company hiding behind it for their own purposes, but it is doing good for society overall, and we'll get into that later. We're just gonna kind of, as you hear us generalize these things, just know we understand there are gray areas, but we can't really get into that right now.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's definitely a neutral area in all of this.
Yes,
there is stuff that is really pretty much based on good solid fact and informing, and bad, which is generalizing and really trying to scare people. But there's sort of a neutral ground in between. And it's not necessarily that it needs to be based on any facts, nor is it, giving false claims. It's sort of neutral ground and would include things like the keep calm and carry on. That was basically a propaganda piece that basically said, okay, bombing is happening. the worst thing that that you can do is basically stop everything you're doing.
Yeah.
So keep calm and carry on. So it was very neutral. It didn't say these guys are bad, or it wasn't based off of anything. It was very, very neutral.
Yep. So with an understanding of good and bad or neutral, we can look into different pieces and try to understand their purpose, facts, and intentions. Mm-hmm. We can also ask questions like, what is the propaganda trying to influence us to do? And to what end? What methods of propaganda are being used? And what is the motive with it?
Yeah, these kind of things are important to help us grow together and become, basically to save free speech. Our democratic process is based off of being able to discuss issues based off of well-informed topics. We're seeing this large and in part today.
Are you telling me that the Founding Fathers did not intend for us to get all of our information off of Facebook and social media? They actually want us to be well-informed. I don't know.
Well, and that's the funny thing is one of the things that this fake news basically is purporting is, okay, we actually had a black president before, and that's something that is being purported out there, but Obama has been. That's one of the things is all of this stuff can be put out there, and if you don't know and you're kind of misinformed or kind of leaned one way or another.
Hey, look, I've seen clips of Hamilton, George Washington. All right, he black president, first one. So I mean, come on, really?
It's so important that, in fact, from 1937 to 1942, there was a U.S.-based organization known as the Institute for Propaganda Analysis. And basically its purpose was to teach people how to think rather than what to think. So basically propaganda would say, okay, these people are awful. And their purpose was like, okay, well, let's understand the more complex. Let's get past just what
is saying, but more how it's saying it.
Yeah, there was a growing concern that the large amount of propaganda at the time could easily be used to prey on U.S. citizens.
Man, how would that be to live in a time where you're so worried about propaganda that it could prey on U.S. citizens? Scary times.
Yeah.
They found different types of literature to help identify, and deal with propaganda. In the fine art of propaganda, they spell out 7 tricks used, including name-calling, glittering generalities. Okay, those aren't. Transfer, testimonial, plain folk. And you have to add an L in there because it's folk.
Folk.
Not folk. Folk.
I'm plain folk.
Card stacking and bandwagoning.
Yeah, so that was some of the things that they pointed out, and they actually had chapters based on each and every single one of those, which was interesting. Other publications were titled Group Leader's Guide to Propaganda Analysis, The Fine Art of Propaganda, War Propaganda and the United States, Propaganda Analysis, and Propaganda, How to Recognize and Deal with It.
Not to mention One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, and Blue Fish. If you look really into it, you can learn a lot about that.
They actually sent these publications to leaders, religious leaders, educational institutions. Basically, they were trying to get as many people thinking about propaganda and analyzing it correctly as possible. In these publications, they taught their ABCs of propaganda analysis, which include A, ascertain the conflict element in the propaganda. B, behold your own reaction elements. C, concern yourself with today's propaganda associated with today's conflicts. D, doubt that your opinions are your very own opinions, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
E, evaluate, therefore, with the greatest care, your own propaganda. So if, you have your own propaganda, but is it your own? So let's take a look.
I agree with it, so it's not propaganda.
And then F, find the facts before you come to any conclusion, which those are all great steps. Those are all great points because especially with fake news, and we'll cover fake news. We'll do an episode specifically about propaganda and fake news and why it's a problem and why so many companies are fighting this. But
today it's A, always distrust the media. B, bully anybody who disagrees with you. C, comment about what you think instead of what other people think. Yeah, we have our own ABCs.
Yeah, with this, like even the last point, find the facts before you come to any conclusion. How many of us do that? How many of us, see that link on Facebook and either repost it or see it, read the headline, and think we get the gist of it?
Or even just liking it without reading it, because what that does is even though you didn't share it, it's still, by liking that's going to show up in other people's timelines, like so-and-so liked this article.
As well, the way that media and some of the algorithms of these different networks work is that, they want you to stay on their network. Mm-hmm. And so that stuff gets, as you like, as you comment, as you participate in one thing, it sort of solidifies you in what things are interesting to you. And of course that benefits the company, but you've got companies like Facebook, like Google, YouTube that are finding ways to kind of fight this and maybe even change it so that we all have a little bit more rounded discussions.
The group that we were talking about, what were they called?
They were the Institute for Propaganda Analysis.
That's them. This group disbanded for many different reasons, like critics saying it was more of a destructive skepticism than an intelligent reflectiveness, which is probably like the most intelligent. Like, could you imagine like somebody writing that in the comment section? Like,
this is more of a destructive skepticism than an intelligent reflectiveness.
LOL.
Smiley face. Poop sign.
Yeah, that's what it would be. Their intentions were good, but they also feared it could be used against people, especially in wartime. So basically, they're saying
people would mistrust U.S. propaganda just as much as foreign. It could be used to kind of slight people one way or another.
Yeah. Well, then I guess almost like you couldn't use it against them. Like you couldn't, like your own government couldn't do it. A good propaganda piece, people would mistrust it because they know it's propaganda.
Well, yeah, and this is all during World War II, and I mean, maybe because this was all happening towards, students and people as they were growing up. Mm-hmm. You've got the 70s and people after that question things from the government. They really questioned and had revolts on some of these things. So these principles are still as important today as they were in that time period. With the way that news, opinions, and information is spread online through social media, these tactics can be much more deceiving because, you don't necessarily have to read it. It's just, it kind of goes by, and whether you acknowledge it or not, it puts something in the back of your mind. I mean, how many times have you turned to someone and said, well, I didn't read the article, but I saw a post that said something about blah, 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 blah. Could that be true? Could that be false? Being able to analyze propaganda and even advertising can help to keep you on the right track.
I saw an article the other day that said that most people only read the headlines of an article. Mm-hmm. I didn't read though. There's something about that. Anyway, now our next video will go into the specific examples of propaganda, different forms in the way messages are sent out. We'll dig into history and even share examples of modern day propaganda. Yeah. But to illustrate, we want to kind of illustrate good, bad, and neutral propaganda. We'll turn to who else but Disney? Because Disney was a beloved company, the U.S. government hired Disney to create forms of propaganda, cartoons that would help fight the Nazis and Hitler.
Yeah, I mean, Disney is world-renowned, and everyone loved their cartoons, and they were kind of widely acceptable, on a lot of things that they did. And
they were very trusted.
Yeah. And so the U.S. hired them to help in these war efforts. And so first, the bad example. Their first cartoon was called De Fuhrer's Face, which showed Donald Duck as a Nazi, which a lot of people, that's what they remember of it.
Yeah.
It later revealed that he was actually dreaming. The cartoon seemed to simplify the issues and problems. Really, it racially charged the different participants of the war and basically made it like they're the bad guys. Everyone out there are bad guys. We're the good guys. So just follow along, do your part. And it ended with sort of an over-patriotic, like Donald wrapped in a American flag and hugging a mini statue of liberty because the dream scared him so much. So it really didn't do much to,
inform. It didn't inform. It just...
it definitely probably did its course, right? It probably helped the war efforts, and not that it was bad, supporting what it did, but as a piece of propaganda, it just sort of blindly asked you to follow without understanding anything other than everyone's bad guys, we're good guys.
Yeah, that So let's move on to the neutral. The neutral would be Saludos amigos.
Saludos amigos.
And the three caballeros. Which is...
If you haven't seen it, it's a fun...
Caballeros.
Maybe we'll link that at the very end of...
Yeah, maybe that'll be the video at the end. Because
music.
it is that good.
I love that song.
It's so good. Especially when he's trying to get like the instrument and he keeps like... And he has the stand-up bass and he plays it like the guitar. Hilarious.
So Disney and his team were actually sent to different South American countries to study, learn, and decipher their culture. The U.S. Basically had a Inter-Americas kind of group that basically sent them. And because Disney's cartoons were popular in these countries, in the Latin American countries, they became somewhat ambassadors to these people. This was all done because several of the Latin American countries actually had ties to the Nazis. And the U.S. wanted to counteract that and strengthen the ties with America. We are America together. In fact, I know Brazil was one of those. They had German U-boats docked in their kind of coves and things like that. The movies produced characters like Jose Carioca, which he is beloved by Brazil. He is everywhere in Brazil. They basically have taken him almost as a mascot for Brazil, but he's a Disney character. And Panchito Pistoles from Mexico. In the Three Caballeros, Panchito comes in. They actually helped create a greater understanding between the different countries, Latin American countries, and even helped change mentalities about different nationalities. In fact, a lot of people in the U.S., once they saw this, realized how advanced some of these people were. They didn't understand that they had big cities, and they were just as advanced as people in America. So this is pretty neutral stuff. I mean, it was still fighting the Nazis.
But it was, hey, learn about other cultures.
Yeah, it was a little bit more roundabout, and it was basically teaching you about other people, which is, I mean, pretty neutral in what it is.
So lastly, the good Disney propaganda is called Education for Death: The Making of the Nazi. This is a movie. This movie was adapted from the actual account of Gregor Ziemer, a U.S. educator. It asks how someone becomes a Nazi and goes on to show how Hans, a typical German child, is taught and brainwashed and grows up to become one of the many Nazis in Germany.
Yeah, he goes through the Hitler Youth program and...
Yeah, it was very informative. It was there to show how this happened, to help you understand what was going on over there. Not just saying they're Nazis because they're evil.
Right.
They're Nazis because they live. Everybody in Germany is a Nazi. That's how it is, and we're better than them, and it's impossible to understand that. They actually went through and showed how this happens, and the cartoon derived its movement from facts. That's a huge thing, and showed a much more understanding and even deep view of the problem. It doesn't just racially separate or categorize good versus bad, us versus them, but works to provide information, of course, to influence. It was trying to influence us to make us think something different, but it did it in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, it also changed the way that people viewed the German people. That the German people, I mean, they were taken advantage of in a big way too. Not to any extent that other races and other countries were, but it helped understand this is where the real problem is the way that they brainwash and make these killing machines.
Yeah. So really, you have to there you have the good, the neutral, or the bad, the neutral, and the good, showing that it's the same company, it's the same medium, cartoons, but the way that they portrayed the facts and what their overall message behind the cartoon was really makes what's good, neutral, and bad.
Yeah, and this is important because, okay, we've defined what propaganda is and propaganda versus advertising. Now we can judge whether it is a good piece or bad piece or maybe even neutral piece of propaganda or advertising, because maybe those ways that we're being influenced are actually coming from outside of the company. For example, Disney being influenced by the U.S. government. So in our next video, we're going to really dive into those examples. We're going to really muddy the waters even more, make it even. We're gonna find
we're
more shades of gray.
I
don't know if we'll get to 50, but we'll really delve into that and kind of show how these different things work and how really, really surprising examples of how propaganda was used. So, what questions do you have? What do you think of good, bad? What examples do you have? Let us know in the comments below, and we will talk with you about that.
Make sure you visit our 100 for 100 contest. Again, you have 3 days to submit something, and you can go on the Wall of Fame back here. We should call it like the bulletin board of fame. That's what it is. The cork board of fame.
Cork board of fame.
And thank you if you like what you saw here and you want to see our next video, subscribe. You can be notified when our next video comes out.
Yeah, thank you so much for liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to our videos.
Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And now let JD finish his sentence.
We really appreciate it.
All right. And now, as promised, here...
To end your video for today and to give you some Wednesday love, the 3 caballeros. Hi!
We're 3 caballeros, 3 gay caballeros. They say we are birds of a feather.